Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the reveal of Pokémon TCG Pocket's latest mini-set called Phantom Masquerade. Well, this is a set I completely made myself with my biggest dreams and hopes. This set features 18 unique cards with extremely fun mechanics that I would love to see in the game in the future. So I focus on two important aspects, and firstly, I want to make more use of the fact that Pocket is a digital game. Some mechanics are not possible in physical TCG, but why not in Pocket? And secondly, I want to shake up the current meta. I'm sick and tired of seeing Sylveon, so why not change things? So, before we go any further, two little disclaimers. All the arts used for the cards in this video come from the official Pokemon cards to avoid any copyright issues, never just steal people's creations. And secondly, I understand that some of these cards might be overpowered, but that is not the aim of this video. I just want to highlight fun mechanics, unique mechanics that could be added to this game. But let's dive into the set and reveal the two most important cards that this whole set is based around. And that is Zorua. Zorua is a super fun unique card with, of course, the illusion ability. What else can you expect from Zorua? But as I mentioned, this is a digital game, so why not make this ability something that only happens in the digital world? When played, choose a basic Pokemon from your deck. The opponent will see this Pokemon as the chosen Pokemon until this Pokemon gets attacked. So basically you can disguise it, you can hide it in plain sight, but not really. So let's say you have another, let's say a basic Geodude in your deck. You can disguise Zorua as a Geodude, maybe your opponent will avoid it, maybe they'll attack it instead. But that's the fun of it, that's the fun of this game, you can hide it in plain sight. And then of course it also has a slight simple move with it called Bite. It's a 20 damage move, it's colorless. I think that's basically all that's needed for this basic card, but this will be the immersive of this set, which I think is insanely fun. But of course, when you have Zorua, you also need to look at the evolution, Zoroark. Zoroark is this case an EX card with again a unique ability called Dark Phantasm. Of course, playing into the fact that this is a phantasmic masquerading set. So Dark Phantasm, when played, this card becomes a copy of any Pokemon card on the field, taking that card's name and attack and energies, except for the HP, weakness and retreat cost. So basically it becomes a exact copy of something that is already on the field, including the energies. So basically we have a double one. But it does not copy the HP, it does not copy the weakness and not retreat cost. So the weakness could be a detrimental thing because it's weak to grass, and the HP is actually very low, only 120, meaning you are kind of stuck with using it, but it's maybe a unique way of again using the digitalness of Pocket. You can copy the opponent's insane Charizard and start attacking with it as well. I think it's a unique mechanic that could be quite cool, and of course if you don't want to evolve it you can attack with Nightclaw, but why wouldn't you? So that's Zoroark. So now we've seen the two most important cards in this set, but of course there's a lot more to come, and it's time to reveal the next one, which actually is an item card. This item card is the Substitute Duel. If you play Pokemon, you know the move Substitute in the mainline games. It's a very annoying move. In this case, why not fit it into Pocket as well? What this does is when you use this as an item card, it will put two substitute cards in your opponent's deck, and then you will shuffle. The substitute cards that you add to that deck have no effect. So basically you are adding extra cards in the deck that don't do anything, meaning, for example, Sylveon or Professor's Reachers and so on, are less strong because there's a chance that they get a substitute card which has no effect, that can't do anything. So basically you're diluting your opponent's deck, which I think is quite a cool mechanic, and again something that plays with the digitalness of TCG Pocket. So that was this fun substitute card. Let's see what else we have in this set, because there's a lot more left. And next up we're gonna look at two at the same time again, and these are both EX cards. First up we have Trevenant EX. Trevenant EX is something that fits very well in this set as the Pokemon. You know, it's like ghostly, phantasmic, but also has sort of like it's covering something, right? And in this case, Trevenant has two moves. It has the move Seed Bomb, which discards the top card from each player's deck. And you'll see more of these discard effects, which I think can play around nicely with each other, because again, drawing is one thing, but discarding is another very strong ability that maybe should be added to this game. Of course, we only have 20 cards, so you need to be careful with it. And the second move will be Missing in the Forest, something that's a little bit based on the actual TCG. This attack does 30 damage for each supporter card in your opponent's discard pile. So this actually is quite cool. Maybe it makes supporters less overpowered, maybe it forces people to use less support and more items and so on. I think this is quite a cool card that can be added, and I don't think 30 damage per supporter is too overpowered when you have like 4 or 5 maybe in there. So that is Trevenant, and I think it's very exciting, but let's have a look at Chandelure. Chandelure is another EX card, a fire type, again fitting very well in this whole set theme. Chandelure has an ability called Cursed Shimmer. This is actually something copied directly from the TCG. When you play this Pokemon to evolve one of your Pokemon cards during your turn, you may discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. So this card is maybe the least unique in mechanics, but again, it's a discard effect. There's a lot of discard things you will see popping up throughout this video, because I think it fits a little bit the trickiness of Phantoms and Masquerades and so on. So basically what you do is, if you evolve into Chandelure, the opponent has to discard the top 3 cards, and also this has a move called Heat Blast, which requires 3 energy to do a massive 120 damage. It is a stage 2 though, so that's why I think this is quite a balanced way of making this card. But I think something that has the ability to just discard your opponent's cards when needed could be quite fun, but only it happens once, right? It doesn't happen constantly throughout the game. And this is also something that might happen a little bit later, but of course a rare candy things can change. So that were 2 other EXs now you've seen. And there's, again, as I mentioned, a lot more to come, so let's have a look at the next 2 cards. And these are both supporter cards. And first up we have Fantina. So as you've seen now, there's a lot of cards that can discard cards. But it means you also need something to a little bit counter that, to not make discarding too OP, right? And that's where Fantina comes in. Fantina, I think, perfectly again fits this set with the Phantom, the Masquerade. Like, she is a beauty icon as well, right? And in this case, what it does is, if you have 8 or more cards in your discard pile, you can use this card, and you can then choose 4 cards from your discard pile, and they'll be shuffled back into your deck. So you can reuse cards from your discard pile and have them in your deck again. And this can be both advantageous or disadvantageous, right? Maybe if your opponent discarded your useful card, you can get it back, but otherwise you can also get maybe an item card you already used back in your hand again, or maybe another support, research, or whatever. There's a lot of fun things you could try out with this, which I think is quite exciting. I think 8 is a good limit, and 4 is also a good limit that you have to choose 4, not up to 4, which I was doubting between as well. So this could be fun, but let's have a look at the next supporter. And the next supporter is none other than Will from the Elite Four. So Will, what does it do? You and your opponent reveal your hands to each other, so you both can see each other's hands, which I think is something that is very crucial in this game, because then you see if your opponent has a Mars in there, if they have a, let's see, maybe an evolution that they were looking for, a rare candy, I don't know, it allows you to play more with it. But also at the same time, you can choose a card in the opponent's hand, and they have to discard it, but they can do the same to you. So therefore, it's like a win-win or lose-lose kind of card, but could be quite useful depending on the situation. Will, of course, being a guy who wears a mask, fits perfectly in the set again. I think it's a very unique mechanic, but sort of also not unique at the same time. Something that is quite balanced, but maybe more detrimental. I don't know if this becomes meta or not, but I think it's a very unique one. Great, so those were 2 of the supporters, but let's have a look at more Pokemon cards. And next up, we're actually going to show 4 at the same time. First up being Rotom. And here is where a unique idea came in my mind. Rotom here in this case has the move Polteageist. It's a very basic electric type of 70 HP, but Polteageist is super unique. What it does is you can choose a bench position on your opponent's side. This position becomes haunted. Any Pokemon in this position will take 20 damage at the end of the controller's turn. What that means is that normally you just put something on the bench wherever you want. But what if the choice of what you put and where you put it on the bench becomes more important? And that's where hazards come in. So in this case, haunting a position becomes like a hazard. You're haunting one of the slots on your opponent's bench. If a Pokemon is in this slot, it takes 20 damage at the end of their turn. And that I think is quite fun, because normally you just put something wherever you want on the bench, but why not change that fact? Why not make it more important if you put it on the left side or in the middle or on the right? And I think that is something that Pocket maybe could play around with a little bit more. We'll see, I think it was quite fun. And for that reason, we're going to go to the second card, which is Frostlass EX. Again, Frostlass, amazing Pokemon. I think it fits very well in this set. It has the ability Freezing Shroud. When this card is played, freeze an empty bench slot on your opponent's side. This slot cannot be used by your opponent as long as this Pokemon is in play. I think this again is another fun way of adding sort of like hazards. You freeze a bench slot or a bench position on your opponent's side. That means that bench slot, they cannot put anything in it. So let's say your opponent has 1 Eevee in the active position and 2 Charmanders on the back. They cannot add that second Eevee on the bench as well, because you've frozen that slot, and as long as Frostlass is in play, it has this ability stays active, and when Frostlass dies, then you can put something on there again. That's why also the move is not too strong, because I think this ability could be quite overpowered, especially when you have 2 Frostlass, right? Because then you can freeze potentially 2 positions, which I think is pretty cool for that reason. So before we go any further, please like and subscribe to this video, and let me know as well which card have you seen so far and you think is amazing. But let's get right back into it again. Marowak. Marowak again is wearing, you know, his mother's skull, and for that reason, again, it fits a little bit with the Masquerade kind of theme. Maybe it's a bit far-fetched, I don't know. But I want to give Marowak some justice, because we have 2 Marowak cards in the game, or even 3 if you count Alolan. They're not that great, but maybe we can have something better. In this case, it has the move Sandstorm. What Sandstorm does is play Stealth Rocks. And you've known it from the game, Stealth Rocks can be quite annoying. Every time you switch in the game, you get damaged, right? In this case, a similar ability is applied. You put Stealth Rocks on the opponent's active position, and whenever something goes into that active position, it takes 20 damage. So for example, if you pair this with like a Sabrina, they have to put something into the active position that will automatically get damaged by 20 damage, which I think is pretty insane. Maybe you can even combine it with Graplock or something else. It needs pure fighting energy, which I think is very fair, otherwise it can be quite overpowered, and also has another move to do a little bit more damage when needed as well, because it's a good card still, Marowak, right? So let's go into the next one, which is Meowscarada. So now we've seen a lot of hazard cards, but why not something that can sort of play around with this a little bit further? Meowscarada has the ability Bouquet Magic. Once during a turn, you can change the positions of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So let's say you have used your Rotom and you've haunted one of their bench slots. They can use Meowscarada's ability to change who is actually in that haunted slot to make sure that Pokemon gets damaged instead of something else. So you're not able to move their active Pokemon, but only the ones on their bench, which I think is quite fun. Then it also has a move called Blooming Flower. What does it do? It does 100 damage. Very basic, but you can choose 1 card from your discard pile and shuffle it back into your deck. Again, we are having a lot of discard effects. We also need something that can put cards back from discard into your deck again, which I think Meowscarada is perfect for. And Meowscarada is again a perfect Pokemon for this set, because it is the Masquerade Pokemon, right? It's in the name almost for that reason. So that was Meowscarada. Now we've seen a lot of cards in the set. Actually, we're already halfway in. There's still 7 left. So let's go look at the next item card. And this case is Heavy Duty Boots. It's a very more generic item card. I mean, you've seen a lot of hazards now, so I think having an item card that removes all these hazards from your side of the field is therefore very fitting in the set as well. Heavy Duty Boots, of course, in the game, they are able to sort of negate hazards, right? You don't get hit by Stealth Rocks, you don't get hit by Toxic Spikes or Sticky Webs and so on. So this is basically the same item, but then inside of this game, where you can remove those hazards. You can remove Rotom's Haunting, you can remove Frosted's Ice, you can remove the Stealth Rocks from Marowak, for example. I think this could be a very cool mechanic and a very cool item then to add with the set, of course. So quickly moving on to more cards. We've seen a lot, and I hope you're excited still for seeing the next ones. And we're gonna show a triple again. In this case, it's Pokemon cards again. And this is one of my favorite Pokemon, Corviknight. Again, I say it every time for every Pokemon so far, but this is a perfect one for this set. Corviknight, a Steel type, Stage 2. It has the ability Lustrous Body. If this Pokemon is in the active spot, your bench Pokemon cannot be targeted or damaged by any abilities, moves, or cards. And I think this is something that could be so meta changing. This is something that is perfectly countering the current meta. Basically, Greninja cannot attack your bench. Cyrus doesn't work. Sabrina does though, but Cyrus doesn't. So for these kind of reasons, I think it's quite fine to add this kind of ability. And it's a Stage 2 as well, right? So it's not that easy to get up and running. Of course, Rare Candy's a different story. But it also has the move Steel Wing, which does 90 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attack. So this becomes the perfect stall Pokemon, the perfect Pokemon to put in your active position for a long time, and basically protect your bench from whatever is gonna happen. Which I think is pretty cool, but this will make Sabrina, for example, more important than Cyrus again, or allow different things to happen. But let's go into the next card, being Farigiraf. Farigiraf has a mask around its head, right? So again, fits this theme very much. I went for a different theme than normal than Pokemon does, but I think it's quite fun. This has a very, very fun mechanic that I would love to see in the game, and it's called Trick Room. Of course, Trick Room is a move in the games. It basically makes slow Pokemon fast and fast Pokemon slow. And what it does here is actually very sort of similar, but also different at the same time. What it does is swaps each Pokemon's weakness with their typing. So what it does is that you, for example, this Farigiraf is a normal type, but it has a psychic weakness. So what happens is then it becomes a psychic type with a normal weakness. And that happens to every Pokemon in the field. And again, this is something that can only really work in a digital format. So let's say your Charizard becomes a water type, or your Venusaur becomes a fire type. I think this is quite a fun mechanic. And it has a move Shadow Bullet, which does 10 damage for each card in your discard pile. Again, playing off those discard mechanics that we have so far. But let's have a quick look at the next one. And this one is Polteageist. Maybe not my most favorite one of this set, but I think it's still pretty cool to have this in there. So Polteageist is a stage 1 Pokemon, Psychic type, and it has the move Anti-Collecting. What it does is you can choose an item card in your discard pile and add it back to your hand. So this allows you to very easily recycle item cards and use them more often. So you can use a potion more times, you can use maybe your fishing net more times, I don't know. You think of it, you're probably better at making decks than I am. It also has the move Surprise Thief, where it does 40 damage normally, but if you have used an item card this turn, it becomes 80 damage. So I think that's not too overpowered. I think it's quite a decent amount. Maybe if you add it to you can use a Pokédex that does 80 damage. I don't know. There's things you can play around with, but it's nice that it has 2 moves and those complement each other, which I quite like. But next is only 3 cards left. And honestly, the last one is pretty insane, but you have to wait for that one. First, we go into these 2. Of course, we have to add Mimikyu to this set as well. And we've seen a few Mimikyu cards in sets before in Pocket, but none of them are, I don't know, amazing or really cool or whatever. I wanted to make something different. Of course, you can use a disguise ability, but I wanted to do something slightly different. I gave this one the move Impersonation. This is something actually from the physical TCG as well. So what it does is you're able to discard a supporter card from your hand, but if you do so, then this move's effect becomes that supporter card. So let's say you discard a Professor's Research, this move becomes a Professor's Research, so every time you attack a Mimikyu, you get 2 cards in your hand, which I think is pretty fun. You can basically have a sort of like a Giovanni that does more damage constantly, I don't know, but it is a move, right? So you cannot really easily use it too often, which therefore I think is not too overpowered, but quite balanced in a way as well. Misty maybe is a bit too much, but it's fun to try out. Misty maybe is not the best fit for this, but who knows. But it has a supporter card to tackle with it. And this one might be very overpowered, but we'll see. We have Alistair. Alistair, what it does is it chooses a Pokemon on the opponent's side of the field, and you can transform your Mimikyu into a copy of that Pokemon. So a little bit similar to what Zoroark does. However, in this case, of course you get the attached energies again, but you keep your own HP, but you transform back at the end of your next turn. So basically you can only attack once with it, and then it goes back to your original form. So I think this could be maybe balanced, maybe it's way too overpowered if you can just copy a Charizard and just attack once and then become a Mimikyu again, giving him only 1 point in return, right? I don't know, maybe Mimikyu should be an EX then instead. Maybe that would be a more fair way to do it, but keep the same stats, maybe even lower HP. But I think again, the transforming of cards is something that works so well on digital formats, and why doesn't Pocket add it? I think that would be a great mechanic to add. And for that reason, actually, we're gonna go look now at the last card. And the last card is actually one of the highlights of the set, again playing to the fact of transforming, but taking it to the extreme. Of course, we have Ogerpon. It's the masked Pokemon. I mean, what else do you want? This is the masked Pokemon, right? Ogerpon has 4 different forms normally, right? It has 4 different masks. So why not have the ability Masked Dancer? So here we see Teal Mask, but has the ability Masked Dancer, and what it does is once during your turn, you can transform this card into any masked Ogerpon and change your attached grass energies to the corresponding type. So you're able to change this Ogerpon in any of the other Ogerpons. So you can start as a grass type, but maybe you can change to a fire type or to a fighting type. And what happens is that all your grass energies attached become that typing as well, so therefore you can always use their moves. In this case, the grass version also has the move Ogre's Hammer, which does 120 damage, but you cannot use the attack again next turn, even after transforming, which I think should be a good specification. But let's have a look at the fire type. So the fire type is with the Hard Flame Mask. So again, it has the same ability, but in this case, instead of changing your grass to the corresponding type, it changes your fire energies to the corresponding type. So in this case, your fire Pokemon would change all the fire energies. If you want to transform to the water version, you get water energies. And the unique move for this Ogerpon is Searing Flame, where it does a basic 60 damage, but you can now burn your opponent's Pokemon. Now let's have a look at the water type. So the water type is the Wellspring Mask version. And again, Masked Dancer, same thing applies, but now changes the water energies to other energies. In this case, the water version has Ogre's Hammer, which does 70 damage and heals 20 damage from this Pokemon. So again, it's sort of like a 90 value damage attack, but in this case it's the water version. And now let's have a look at the fighting version. So the fighting version is the Cornerstone Mask. Again, same ability, in this case it has the move Mountain Ramming, which is 80 damage, but you can't discard a top card of your opponent's deck, which I think is a pretty fun mechanic, again playing into the fact of whole discard theme going around with this whole set. But this is basically what Ogerpon does. So you can willingly, every turn you can change to whatever Ogerpon you want and attack with that one, because the energies change accordingly. And it has low HP, right? So it's not too strong and too overpowered, and all the moves require free energy. But I think it's nice that you can change your weakness, you can change things here and there, you can change your typing advantage perhaps. It gives you more possibilities without being, in my opinion, too overpowered. Maybe it is completely busted, I don't know. I'm not an expert, I'm just having fun here. So these were the 18 cards in my Phantom Masquerade set. And I think they're a lot of fun. And hopefully it gives you some inspiration for the future. But please let me know what your favorite card was in the set. I would love to know more. And of course, please like and subscribe if you can. I really appreciate it. It helps my channel. And hopefully we'll see you again next time. Bye bye.